Jim, a lot has happened in the past 24 hours since we last spoke, so we wanted to get your reaction to all of it. Let's just start with the biggest piece. Ashley Banfield reporting exclusively based on what she describes as a source high up in law enforcement, someone who's been around the block, who says that the brother-in-law of Savannah Guthrie, whose name is Tommaso Cioni, is, quote, may be the prime suspect. And with respect to Mr. Cioni, we have not had any interaction with him. I'm assuming that he denies this vehemently. We haven't heard from the family at all, and he's not been expressly accused as being the suspect, but maybe the prime suspect was the wording that Ashley Banfield's law enforcement source gave her. And on top of that, law enforcement sources told Ashley Banfield that police have now towed and impounded the vehicle belonging to his wife, Annie Guthrie, who is Savannah's sister and the missing woman, Nancy Guthrie's daughter. Banfield went on to report that there was some connection to Annie Guthrie's car and to the son-in-law. So that's, again, take it for what it's worth, because it's one reporter with one law enforcement source, unconfirmed and unresponded to by the actual target of the report. The sheriff's office has come out, just to reiterate to the audience, and tried to dismiss the report somewhat. There was an express denial, but they did say there is no suspect or person of interest who's been identified at this time. Yeah, that's it. We have not identified a suspect or a person of interest. We continue to speak with anyone who may have had contact with Ms. Guthrie, and we're working daily. We appreciate public's concern, but sharing of unverified accusations or false information is irresponsible. It does not explicitly deny that they're looking at the son-in-law or that they towed and impounded Annie Guthrie's car. So your reaction to all that?
Okay, a lot there, and a lot. I listened to your interview with Ashley, very informative. When we started yesterday talking, you and I, victimology was the first term I mentioned. Yeah. And in victimology, we said family, friends, then we broke it down to, repairmen and visitors at the house, whatever. And family always has to go first. And Ashley brought it up, the concentric circles. 80 to 85% of murders are committed by someone who knows the victim. How well they know them, in passing, tangentially, or actually, a close, very specific, close family member. So it's nothing unusual about family members being looked into in this sort of investigation. Impounding a car, either through consent of the owner, or certainly with a search warrant, which covers them more legally down the line, those would never go to trial or pre-trial motions, whatever, makes the most sense there. So they must have had probable cause for something to bring in this car and consider this person.
If they did it via warrant.
If they did it via warrant.
She's not sure whether he just gave it over.
Sure, which they would sign the consent forms. I've done that hundreds of times in my law enforcement career. People, if they have nothing to hide, or even if they do sometimes, they would still sign the property over, whatever it is. So in a consent form. So that happens all the time. And I'm a linguist too. We can talk about that a little bit later with maybe these alleged ransom letters. But
yeah, we definitely want to get to that.
Interesting qualifier that the word may, M-A-Y, may be a prime suspect. And I get it. The source, whoever it is sort of covering their tracks in that regard, because maybe they're very close, but not that close that they have more information than that. But again, quite frankly, looking at an immediate family member would not be that unusual. Now, why they were perhaps interviewing one or more family members, the sister, the brother-in-law, perhaps they were also running cell phone tower checks, and they see some activity late, 2 in the morning, Sunday morning,
so
and
let me
that
ask
could
you
have been part of the probable cause.
Exactly. This is where I want to go with it, because forget Ashley's report for a second. If you're law enforcement out there and you know that it was Annie, I think it was Annie Guthrie, and I don't know whether the husband was with her or not, but I think it was Annie Guthrie that brought the mom back from playing mahjong. We were also told that it was a church event, so I'm assuming it was mahjong at the church on Saturday night at 9:45. Hence the interest in her car potentially. But you would, of course, even though you assume a loving relationship between a mother and a daughter, that's not how cops work. They actually don't assume loving relationships with anybody. Everybody's on the table until they're not on the table. So they would have, wouldn't they, as a matter of due course, Jim, have done a search on her phone and where it was all night long, and on her husband's phone and where it was all night long.
And Megyn, besides that, she's the last person ostensibly that saw her alive, certainly on the record. So it makes every sense and every common sense from an investigative perspective to look at that phone. And then while they're looking at her phone, look at the husband's phone too, meaning Savannah's brother-in-law. And that makes perfect sense. And maybe something came up investigatively, calls, incoming, outgoing, maybe text messages, but if nothing else, just the pings on the local towers that said, hey, this car was here. And if the mother was dropped off at 9, 10, even 11 o'clock at night, it seems like everyone's sort of signing into the fact that whatever bad happened to her was around 2 a.m., give or take. So that's when the pinging would have to start again. Maybe very normal for the daughter, Annie's car, to show up there at, again, 9, 10 o'clock when mom's being dropped off. But if it then goes back at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's when questions have to be asked. And the phone may not even indicate, well, it probably wouldn't indicate what car is being used. Who knows how many cars Annie and her husband have? And it's interesting, we only hear one car being taken and by the search warrant and impounded, and not multiple. And there's no indications that the home was searched. So perhaps the police just going one step at a time, stick with the obvious thing. Maybe they know the car was the one that dropped her off, or that's the one that was out at 2 a.m. And that's why they're looking to search it for, little graphic here, but obviously blood, tissue, anything that could be found and connected to Mrs. Guthrie.
Of course, they would say to everyone who had had interactions with Nancy within the hours leading up to her disappearance, you tell me, but I think as soon as they sat down with Annie and Tommaso the next day, they would have said, can we have your phones? Wouldn't they, Jim? I mean, isn't that standard course? Can we have your phones? Like, just to rule you out.
Well, two things, yeah. For exclusionary purposes, of course, ask for the phones. But I hope when the early interviews were done, and you don't know yet, but I hope they separated husband and wife and did separate interviews. And that way you could find out any kind of conflicting stories there. We don't know. I mean, everyone was probably crying, upset. The police go in there, and who knows, they may have just interviewed people on a couch, and Annie and her husband were there at the same time. I'm hoping at some point we have separate interviews and they can actually break down and really get into the weeds about who was where, when. And of course, that is if they haven't lawyered up yet. And that remains to be seen.
True, as Ashley's one law enforcement source has told her that they have now towed and impounded Annie's vehicle. What does that tell you? Okay, so let's assume they didn't get a warrant. Let's assume they just asked Annie if they could take her car, and they took it and they impounded it. What does that tell us?
Well, the word impounding doesn't really mean anything from a legal perspective. I mean, you could argue it could, but just if it's consensually agreed to, they could just take it to the parking lot of the police or the sheriff's department, and they have their evidence response team go through it. They probably would bring in the FBI and those who do this stuff all the time. And of course, they're vacuuming, they're taking any kind of liquid samples, whatever they may be. And they may have a cadaver dog. We talked about that a little bit yesterday, Megyn. So they're doing all kinds of forensic searches. They have, material they spray. They have, laser lights and all this stuff to look for, we'll just say, remnants of someone being in there, most likely against their will. I'm thinking in the trunk or the back seat, not just riding in the passenger seat. The mother may have very well been in that car. So her DNA in that car in and of itself, touch DNA.
I think we know she was in it.
Of
right?
course,
I think
yes.
When Annie dropped her off.
Now, that would be the front seat or maybe the back seat. Was she in the trunk? Was she in some other part of the SUV? I don't even know what kind of car it is that you wouldn't have an 84-year-old person riding in. And that's what they'd be looking for, some of this very specific
Well, of course,
forensic
we know that
material.
she was bleeding. We know that from the blood spatter. But before I get to that, is there any reason, if they didn't suspect Annie or her husband, I haven't heard that they suspect Annie, if they didn't suspect her spouse, Tommaso, is there any reason they would take that car? Like, why would they take that car, Jim? I'm trying to find like a benign explanation for why they would, again, reportedly, according to one law enforcement source, take their car. And it wasn't denied in that sheriff's statement.
Investigatively, they're trying to cover every possible lead, every possible potential they can, and they certainly want to make sure it's not damaged or somehow, cleaned out or something else done with the car that could cover up evidence. So someone came up with the idea, and again, I'm listening to the denials that you related from the sheriff's spokesperson, and that no prime suspect, no one is a person of interest, but they felt, let's cover all our tracks here. Let's get the only car that we knew, at least that Saturday night, before midnight, that the mother was in. Let's go in there and see if perhaps any of those forensic materials there. So on the grand scheme of things, Megyn, I don't think it's all that unusual that this car would be taken. I don't want to jump the gun here and right away point the finger at Tommaso. Yeah. We've all been down the path before of cases like this, and well, this guy looks really good, but it turned out not to be that person. So, and I'll respect Ashley's source. I'm never a big fan of sources. I was never one while in the FBI, but that's another story. So, and I know I'm familiar with cases I worked, including the anthrax case, where a high up source got things really wrong. And that didn't actually help the case when Chief Moose was not supposed to release the information from the tarot card. That's a piece of history there for your listeners. But so the source information is not always correct. But assuming that he's onto something there, or she, through Ashley, it's not that unusual to take the closest people to a missing victim or a murder victim and just search out everything about them. And that way you can safely say you've ruled them out. And Megyn, you're an attorney. I can see the investigator, the detective in court 2 years from now. Well, did you ever even consider searching the car of the brother-in-law, and the sister? And they say, no, they didn't. Yeah. Well, in front of a jury, that can create a whole sort of exculpatory sort of situation. So they're covering all their tracks here. They may have 100% grounds for doing this, or it may also be sort of an exclusionary thing. Let's get it out there.
International disputes, inflation, rising national debt, digital currency. There is a never-ending list of reasons that gold has risen over 700% in the last 20 years. And a never-ending list of reasons smart Americans diversify a portion of their savings into precious metals with Birch Gold Group. Gold can thrive during uncertainty, which is why it's a crucial part of a balanced strategy. It gives you peace of mind, given all the events that could impact the U.S. economy. See if holding gold in a tax-sheltered retirement account is right for you. Birch Gold can help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. Just text MK to the number 989898 to receive your free info kit on gold. There's no obligation, just useful information. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, consider letting Birch Gold help you diversify with gold, so you too can have peace of mind regardless of the uncertainty. Text MK to the number 989898. So it's possible they just took that car to say we tracked down every lead, and it's possible this guy, this law enforcement officer, as you point out, we don't know if it's a guy or gal, saying the brother-in-law may be the prime suspect, could just be him speculating this is on the opposite side of the ledger. We should do both because we have no idea whether this is going to bear out or not, and we don't want to wrongly condemn this man, nor does Ashley Banfield, by the way. But she's a very solid reporter, so we're following the investigation step by step.
I'll just end this part, or I'll go on as long as you want, but I would actually say at this point the investigators would be remiss if they did not take that car and do a thorough search of it. Turn it back and say, hey, we found nothing in there, and go from there. That doesn't mean they won't find anything. I don't know. You and I are on the outside, so is Ashley technically. Oh, she's talking to someone on the inside. So we don't know, but I feel that's a very logical investigative step for them to take, including the phones, as you said earlier, and say, folks, this is very routine. You have no problem with this, right? There's some other cases. I know the John Benet Ramsey case, the parents, fought tooth and nail. And we don't have to get into all that, but there are some parents or some family members that don't want to give up information, or they fight it for months, interviews, things like that, and you wonder why.
Well, this would have been so strange. I mean, I just can't imagine that Annie and Tommaso would have said anything other than, please take our phones and look at them, even if there was something to hide in this, whatever scenario. Because they called the cops at noon on Sunday. They'd only been alerted at 11:10 that she hadn't shown up at Mass. So the sheriff has been pointing out they took about an hour to look for her themselves. They were worried. They realized, this is very strange. She's not where she's supposed to be. She's not in her home. But my point is, the sheriff then shows up at noon, and, at some point during the day when they realized they actually had a missing person, he might have said to them, can I see your phones? He might not have. He might have just been treating them as just complete victims. And, but it would have been so bizarre if he said, hey, can I see your phones just because you were last with her? So bizarre at that point for somebody to be like, no, you can't. Like, I feel like they would have been handling the whole investigation differently if somebody had said that. So, okay, let's just keep going, because that's all a discussion about what we don't know and what it might mean, which is not that helpful. But we do know that we've now seen blood out in front of the house. It is true that the Nest camera is gone from the front of the house. Ashley's reporting that there was one there, and then there was one behind the house, and that they were destroyed. So what did you glean from the blood evidence in the front?
I mean, obviously, Mrs. Guthrie didn't go of her own accord. I mean, that's very simple to stay there. We kind of discussed that yesterday, and that is clear blood spatter to some degree. It looks like it's falling from a gravity perspective straight down. I don't see the brush stroke, so to speak, going off in different directions. I didn't really look at that closely, but so it looks like someone's being carried out, or at least supported under their arms, because we know this woman can't walk all that far on her own. And if someone punched her in the nose, punched her in the mouth, of course she's going to need help walking, or she has to be carried. So somehow the blood, from a gravity perspective, is flowing downward. Who knows how the body was repositioned in some way, shape, or form? Was a cover? Did the person have whatever, paper towels, whatever, put it over mouth or nose to make sure the blood hopefully wouldn't get in the car? They probably didn't care about it on the street or the driveway, whatever that is, the pavement, but they probably didn't want it in the car. Now the odds are it's still wound up there anyway. There's going to be trace evidence. If Mrs. Guthrie was put in the car, there's going to be trace evidence of her, certainly what she was wearing, et cetera. So without seeing more of a longitudinal from inside the house to outside, the exact length and breadth of the blood droppings, I'm not sure what else to make, although the body just could have been repositioned where the blood came down more on top of Mrs. Guthrie, whatever she's wearing, and for the moments from wherever it stopped at the front door into the car, we have an absence of it. And it could be a very logical explanation having to do with physics and gravity.
Yeah, you raise a good point about how it's blood droplets. There's not a smearing of it, and there's a significant amount, but it could be from like a nosebleed. That to me didn't look like somebody had been, shot in the femoral artery, right? It wasn't that level of blood.
No, and it doesn't look like arterial bleeding, as you just intimated there. But someone had to slap this. And I hate to get as graphic as it, but probably to control her, she may have started yelling, screaming. Who knows? Well, we discussed yesterday: did someone ring the bell, knock on the door? Did they have a key to the door? This brings in the family situation. We can't rule anything out at this point. Is it that stranger? Is it a stranger that she kind of knew that knocked on the door and recognized, oh, can you help me? And they let her in. And then, she's cold cocked by someone behind the door jamb, whatever. So there's still a lot of scenarios to look at here, but the blood itself, I'm not going to put any high level of sophistication that special bandages were used to stop it. It could have just very well been, let's just pick the person up and put in the car. And you raised a point early on with Ashley, and I think both of you agreed on it. And if this was a stranger and somehow she was killed, just leave the body there. There's no reason to take the body, especially now that there's been no kidnapping demand, certainly of which we are aware. But if somebody knew the person, that's a whole different set of criminal activity. There's then staging involved. And staging doesn't have to be real sophisticated where you pull out drawers and you take some jewelry to make it look like it was a burglary of some sort. It could simply be just removing the body and or the person. And that could be the sort. So if you know the person, and again, we're now talking that it's not a kidnapping for ransom. If you know the person and you think you could be a logical suspect, you do a lot of things different when you commit a crime to avoid being named in that suspect pool.
Mm-hmm. It's just so strange that she was removed. I mean, if this isn't a kidnapping for money, why was she removed? We talked about yesterday, maybe it was a kidnapping for money all along, but she passed once she was kidnapped because she's an old woman and she isn't in great health. But either way, you were pointing out they could still try a ransom demand, and that does not appear to have happened so far, which I'm going to get to those ransom notes in one second, but I'm still on the house. Ashley's also reporting that there were 2 Nest, not Ring cameras. We saw one used to be at the front door, and her reporting is that the second one, I think she believed the second was at the back door, and that the back door was open. She reported that as well from her law enforcement source. So it is interesting that the 2 cameras, her reporting is that they were destroyed, and then we believe, though it hasn't been confirmed, that then law enforcement took them. So is that a sophisticated thing or no? And what does it tell you? Like, I would imagine if I'm going to break into a house I don't know, I'm probably only worrying about the Nest camera that's on the door that I'm using. I mean, it's kind of interesting that they're both allegedly destroyed on front and back.
You know, I like throwing in quasi-historical elements sometimes when I'm looking at these cases. And when I was a young police officer at our FBI handling burglaries, the burglars knew to unscrew the lock on top of the door, the front door.
Can you repeat that, Jim? I missed that.
Sure. As a young police officer and then FBI handling burglary cases, big ones, little ones, sometimes the bad guy would go up and unscrew the light on top of the front door. And that just gives them privacy. They may do it the night before or sometime during the day, then come back. So that's not what happened here, but it shows that someone's thinking a little bit in advance. And I didn't use the word yesterday, but I truly believe there's the term that this person was mission oriented. They went there with a purpose. And they knew enough. You didn't have to unscrew the light bulb, like I said, before all these cameras are out there, but they knew enough to take one or both cameras. Perhaps they did both cameras first because they weren't sure how they would get in, ingress, and how they would get out, egress. So they wanted to cover, both angles, so to speak, and just take out both cameras and smash them. I'm not sure why the police wouldn't say either they have the cameras or they don't have the cameras, but smashed or not. But whatever, that they're not admitting to that. So perhaps it's evidence they know they can find on the person, although you think there'd be no reason for them to keep the cameras if they took them with them, meaning the kidnapper, the abductor. So again, a little bit of sophistication I'll give to this team, person or team. But I won't put them in some sort of ultra level of criminal mastermind. They knew to smash a camera, maybe take it and do whatever with it. In the old days, they would have unscrewed the light bulb on top of 1 or 2 doors leading into the place.
Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.